Japan Base, Volume 1, Chapter 173, bottom of page 349. So we've been discussing the interface of Torah, which parallels the interface of Ak. At the Torah, there's the Klal and Prat. This is how the Torah encompasses everything, the whole picture. This is how it breaks down into each time in each specific detail. And to explain this, there's two levels in Torah. Began the whole discussion of David HaMelech's Miras Chayelichu Kecha, for which he was punished. They call it Torah's Miras, and explained basically two aspects to it. That David was consoling himself with all the aggravation and his suffering. Number one, that everything in the world is insignificant, even if it's all totally, it's all dependent on one detail in the Torah. It's not significant, including his troubles. Secondly, Zmiris, from the word the Zamer, to uproot and uproot Zamer Aritzim, to uproot the weeds, and two supply lines that feed the negative forces that plague David's life. We said that when this physical suffering it's a result of spiritual deprivation. From the time of the Beis Hamikdash, when there was a lot of Gidei Likud, there was also physical prosperity and good times, also physically success. When there's a suffering, we know that it shows that there was a power of Klippus. So David was consoling himself that the Torah has the power to eliminate, cut off the supply lines of all the negative forces, whether they come from Tzeni Samaki, from above, period of Amal, or from Shrosh of Lamata, the Tachas, which is from the Ribitz and Tzumim, the very deep concealment. He explained how this is all dependent on the Shomus Yisrael. We have the power to cut off these supply lines, we have the power to feed them, unfortunately, through our own arrogance or degradation and succumbing to our base desires. Either one, if we lift ourselves up with arrogance, we lift the purpose and the chutzpah to also lift themselves up. When we see ourselves, when we succumb to our lowest form of behavior, that in a sense feeds the purpose too, and their concealment. So he explained that adds a unique power that they don't have on their own. They have some power from existence. The fact that God created the world, some energy flows everywhere. God creates it. He gives life to everything, sustenance, even to Klippus and Sitzrach. Negative. But an abundance, Yisera, a unique Yisera, additional energy, more energy, and even worse, that we have the power to, in a sense, create almost like a forced situation where godliness is forced to be concealed, not willingly as he wishes to do so, and that's what defines Golos Hashem. The force is captive, he's somewhat captive. The reason is because he bound himself for us. As a result of binding himself, he's so-called captive. The way we free ourselves from that, if someone's in that situation, is through a bitterness, empathy, a profound empathy for the Golos Hashem, for this doctrine, for this captivity. That helps free sparks, free the divine presence that's trapped. And then, the positive side is how do we connect, is when we fill our hearts, especially the inner part of our hearts, so first with tefillah, after the bitterness to break down. We fill our hearts with contemplation of the divine, and the heart permeates us. That is what is the best way to eliminate or preempt this supply line, first of all, for the makif, because the makif radiates within us, it doesn't remain detached and removed, and it also fills us up with energy, so then there's no room for those gradations and diminishments that come as a result of this concealment, the concealment. This too is done through Torah, the successor deal with the supply line from dealing with the market. They bring the market into Primi, and the mitzvahs so the negative mitzvahs deal with the supply line, eliminate the supply line that comes as a result of very profound concealments. That's the Rebbe Miskel Begrenam, Cherev Pithias, that when you contemplate on Rebbe Miskel, the grandeur of the divine, the Grenam, so this story doesn't type Grenam here, but Cherev Pithias, the two double-edged sword, the two edges of the sword, deal with these two, they deal with the so-called choking the supply lines of these two functions. Two ways that Klippa gets straight from power. That's what we did. That's what David did, was console himself with these two elements. He said the last line in the last chapter, David's and in addition, besides the fact that the nothing compared to Torah, nothing in the world is significant at all. Also, Torah cuts off and upweeds, that chokes the Klippa, the Chitzenim, the methods we just discussed. So now we continue chapter 173. Still has not concluded exactly how this is the two parts of Torah, Klal and Prat. Obviously, he's going there, and so we'll understand it better. But this is the whole, so to understand better the two aspects of Torah, which is the two aspects of the interface. But technically, you can already see that here we see how Torah is being applied to existence. How Torah is already speaking to the world of Gvul, to the world of saying that the universe is not significant compared to Torah. That's already a relationship. If you remember when he spoke about Arich and Atik, the Primis Atik, so you can't even call Primis Atik or Primis Arich, Primis Ak, Adam Kadman. You can't even say the word that there is even a relationship at all that's distant. You can't even call it that it's a klal to the prat. And then there's a level where it is a klal to the prat. So clearly you see that this level of Torah, we're talking about Torah is really related to existence, over the Melech experience. One, that it relates to the details by saying it's insignificant compared to that level. And two, that it relates to it by cutting off the supply lines. That means it's relating to and affecting existence on its terms. So though Torah it's a necessary component in Torah, the question is this the ultimate Torah? Is this the only part? So of course we're going to learn that there's a whole other dimension which we're getting to. But just that's the connection, just to keep the flow going here. And you bring it down in very so-called more practical terms. Before we were talking about it more esoterically, where Ak is and so on. Remember, the Torah is a force in this world that's bringing that type of energy to be able to handle and create that proper interface and fusion. The fact that he brought before Tomim B'Maisav, which goes back to chapter 82, also shows us the effect of a makif. That means the effect how the makif is affecting the pnimi. So with the effect of the pnimi, which is very much part of the theme of this whole discussion, how the makif brings the bittul into the pnimis, which is what allows this to take place. But as we shall learn, there's another part of Torah which relates more, I guess, to the Ein Sof. That we can lead to. Much more not connected so much to the structure, but to the yarn. We're not there yet. Okay. This is what the Razal say. This is what we began in chapter 171. Now we continue 173. This is what the Razal David called Torah Zmidus. Dine Mashakol Chayes Elomus. Toli, the Torah Zel B'chins Chetzenis. Because now the entire sustenance and life force in the world is dependent on Torah. This is the outer dimension of Torah.
But I think maybe should talk about David's Midas. So you call that Torah's Midas?
Yeah, like you said, yeah, exceeds Midas. Right, at the beginning of Kufay Naya, there you can say so much bigger. He says he exceeds Midas. One is all David's Midas. Shenan Shalzah, right? Yeah, big. So he's explaining now why. Because all this that we said is very powerful. However, it's all totally, to say the whole world's life is totally dependent on the Torah, that's Chitzenis HaTorah. And K'mosh HaTorah bo b'derech prat b'atzilus shabo. Which means HaTorah comes into specific detail in Atzilus, and the Atzilus are within it. No, I'm sorry. Derech b'atzilus shabo v'ayodahu binya v'tikkun elam. Shabo, through Torah. But in Torah, Va'ayidei Torah is the structure, is the building and the repair of the worlds, as we learned back a few chapters in chapter 170 when he spoke about Hipno, the Tanai, that God created, that God, the condition He made when He created the world. The whole Binyan Ha'elam, remember we spoke the whole thing. Why? Because the Torah is building the world. It's that God looks into the Torah and builds the world. The Torah relates to existence. No, but this is how Torah comes into detail. We learn the Torah said, "Ein Sof, David Hashem El Moshe, David Abnei Yisrael." We spoke all the levels. It goes from Chochmah all the way through Malchus to create the Yacht. So the Klal to the Prat, Torah comes into Zman. Chsuma Nikna Megillah Nikna. The government Regezu Tefes Mokem Eira Chai Shalelus. For compared to this level, meaning Torah as it applies itself to existence, the world, the energy, the life force, and energy, the energy and life force in the elements is Tefes Mokem, has significance. It has significance to say that it's insignificant. Obviously, that's what the point is making here. Because Torah is applying itself to it. And saying that compared to the Torah, which is the creator of everything in existence, nothing matters, and that's why he shouldn't be troubled by all this suffering. But it's the Torah as it applies itself to existence. That's the bottom line. Al umka or imka or primiyusahi yuchedes legan lebein sof hamilum. But the depth, the inner dimension of Torah, not Chitzenis HaTorah, is completely united and attached and one with the infinite divine light that manifests in Torah, the Tachlis HaYichud, in an ultimate fusion and unity. Compared to this Ein Sof, which is the Primis HaTorah, the depth of Torah, the inner dimension of Torah, all the worlds are absolutely null and non-existent. So since Ein Sof manifests in this inner dimension of Torah, so the same thing, the world's nullified. They're completely non-existent. So we see here literally the same language that we used before in the Sfiras is using now in Torah. What do we say by the Sfiras, if you recall? That there are two levels of so-called beyond. Ak is beyond existence, but it's a cloud that has a snapshot of existence. He said that nothing exists there tangibly. It's not tangible. They're all there. All levels are one. Asiya Tatzilus, if you remember. It's like a blueprint. But it is a blueprint. And he kept on going back and forth and saying, as much as it's removed, it's still a blueprint of existence. Pnimi Yasak relates much more to the divine vision of what God wants of existence. Like we spoke about the spheres. The spheres, as they are in Atzilus, they manifest in containers. There's a structure. But how are the 10 spheres not in the hidden spheres looking at Tzimtzum? They're the artist envisioning a structure. The focus there is the artist. The focus there is he wants, just like he wants bleakful spheres, he wants now 10 spheres. You don't build the world from that. That allows a world to, there's place now, because the artist has now envisioned the possibility. Shir atzmei b'koyach. But you need a tzimtzum, and you need levels, and so on. Ak, on the other hand, is already a blueprint where it's now been put in some type of documentation. So the same thing with Torah. There's an aspect of Torah that relates to existence. God looks into the Torah, creates existence. All the details, Zman, Moken. It has to relate to existence, or else we don't have a blueprint with which to follow. How could we, who are structured human beings, If we didn't have a Pesach, a Shavuos, a Shabbos, a weekday, we need time and space. Our definite life is defined by time and space. You need a Torah that speaks to time and space. You just said Torah is above time and space, and the only way to reach it is you have to leave your own time and space. Then we don't have it impermeating and infiltrating our existence. But at the same time, we have to know that that's not the essence of Torah. The core of Torah is an expression of the divine. It's pure divine. Now, obviously, you want to join Pnimius HaTorah, Chitzonius HaTorah. Even though he didn't explain it yet, but clearly Chitzonius HaTorah is Nigla, which talks about halacha and talks about specifics. If it didn't, we wouldn't know what to do. All the diyukim you learn, Shulchan Aruch. But you learn it, you don't even see anything that's spiritual necessarily. It seems like a complete mechanical. But it deals with the details and dissects it into every iota, every possibility. But what's a Pnimius HaTorah? It's Elokus. It's divine. And when you don't take a Pnimius HaTorah, you don't focus so much. It doesn't talk so much about this detail, that detail. It speaks about the so-called ruchnis of it all, the godliness within everything. What's happening when you do a mitzvah, and so on. So he's not elaborating yet on that, but it's also becomes a little apparent. So both are necessary. And obviously David was punished because he focused and essentially got stuck on the fear of David. He probably, the fact that he so-called seemed like a little desperate, I guess, because he was suffering. Because the fact of the matter, it did console him, so what's wrong? He used the tape. But as we're going to learn, the fear of David's level, it's already a little l'shalei l'shma, so to speak. Not focusing on the real power of Torah. That's what I end up, so calling it a song, calling it a simcha, and all that is the focus on the outer dimension.
You learn Chassidus.
Halavai, we should be on the level of David. It would be a nice Chassidish approach. The person, the whole world is not Tevis smoking by him. And uproots all the klippus. I think that would be pretty cool. So I say to you, you can't jump to another level if you don't have this. It's not possible.
According to this, is the Zion Bay's, or is it trying to bridge both, or is it Pnimius HaTorah?
Well, in Pnimius HaTorah itself, you have the Pnimius, as it relates more, it's constant levels. Yeah. Generally speaking, the Pnimius HaTorah, Chitzonius HaTorah, the two levels is talking here, but you constantly combine. There are people who learn Chassidus like others learn Nigla. So it's all, like I said, you can't go to level 2 without level 1. There's no way. You have to. It's because it's about climbing the ladder, it's like climbing the steps. Okay. So just what's so eloquent here is that now Torah is becoming the language that we learned until now was more spheres. As I said, that this part of the Hemshech is already beginning to turn it into a blueprint for life. Till now, till Torah, he was talking more the mechanics of it. Where the spheres are, which levels, and so on. Now he's actually speaking in ways like here's the formula, the methodology to do it. Till now, I explained the methodologies. There was plenty discussed about it, but now it's really coming down to the real tool is Torah. Torah is the ultimate instrument to bridge and create and allow us to connect to this interface.
Torah is the best schir.
There you go. That would probably be like Zmira said, if we could.
No, it's the best instrument. Schir
I
is the best instrument.
I'm saying. It's a critical component because in Aveda, that's the bottom line. Is the Torah doing something for you, or is it expressing what God wants? And we've talked many times, these are both unnecessary. Asher Kedushan and Tzresim L'Sivanu. And then he wants, on the Echtil, to do that particular, to eat that particular food, and to reveal the godliness in that particular action. So now we go, Kudisa b'Medrash Rabbah Pasuk L'Chol Tichla L'Yisikeis. It says in Medrash Rabbah on the Pasuk, L'Chol Tichla. Every beginning, I've seen an end. Tichla means usually beginning. L'Chol Tichla Yeshtach. Tichla could also mean Tachlis.
Like the Hayom from Shabbos.
No. It's connected. It's not it. L'Chol Tichla here means everything, to every purpose, to everything that exists. Basically means everything that has a beginning.
How about make vegans?
L'chol yesh sikusim. Everything has its parameters, measurements. Sikusim are like the exact, like inches, the exact measurements, right? Hainu b'chol hanegvul midah. It has a gvul and a midah. Gvul is a limit and a midah a parameter, measurement.
Every goal I've seen.
Okay, goal as in tachlis. Every goal I've seen limit. That's the general, but here it means chol tichla. It means it means everything in existence.
What language is
It's
Sikusim?
Aramaic. Sikusim is Aramaic. Sikusim is like what the Sikusim are like the edge, the little markings that you make in a blueprint. You know, like huh? Yeah. Sikusim is a measurement, I believe. No? Yeah, I think that's what Sikusim is. It comes from the word Sikus. No, it's an Aramaic word. Avla Teira ein lo Sikus. The Teira has no measurement, no limit. The Chol B'chinas, so we see here, another dimension in Teira. It's not like existence. The Chol B'chinas Taina Shebe'elam, so he says, every pleasure, every dimension of pleasure in existence, the world. Hakol B'chinas Hagbola. Everything has a limit. If you shazel Adlavad, because it's only a reflection. If it has a limit, an end, boundary, and a limitation.
Okay, so try it on camera.
But if you're real about time, you want to have endless pleasure.
So move on to the next one.
In parentheses, he has like every energy. Every form of light has a limit to the amount of it can extend. The gam eravuka yesh laketz. Not just eirameir, not just the flame of a small candle, even of a torch, has a limit. Kamish magia. How far it will reach. So it could be a massive torch, but at the end of the day, it's finite. The gam shemesh, and also in the light of the sun, yesh chilukim, there are differences, distinctions. So in addition to the fact, first of all, sunlight doesn't go endlessly. There's a limit. There's a certain point where you can't see the sunlight, or it's so distant it doesn't have an impact. That's what he's saying here. So even though sunlight goes very far, but you see a distinction whether it's close or distant. It's interesting he says that. In other words, he's suggesting that every planet can see the sun, even if it's a small little speck, but there's a significant difference between, let's say, Earth, which is warmed by it, and the next planet, which is too cold to have light. So the bottom line is there's a limit. You see there's a limit, which means at some point the sun will be invisible, even though he's not saying that. See, with that
that's the end of the using it as the son
no,
of the
it's
Mayor.
I can explain the reason why. The devil once asked the question, the famous question, what means kind of said, the moon is full, the moon is the 15th of the month, the moon is full all month. It's at the angle. It's only an angle-ish. The moon is always in a certain area. If you go out into space, there's always a full moon. It's the Earth. The angle is different angles, like a mirror. So the Rebbe said, because it says in Chumash, L'choyer al ha'aretz, create Shnei Ma'aretz Hagdelim, create two things, L'choyer al ha'aretz. Their purpose is to radiate, to illuminate Earth. So their purpose defines what they are. So it's not just a side thing, since the whole thing of the moon is and the sun is right under the Earth. So it's a full moon on Earth, that's what it's tachlis. Remember, give the whole thing, because you notice you go by an object, not by what exists, but what its purpose is.
Why would the Ashkenaz land and the moon was dark? What
If you learn Chassidus, it actually does not say that. It says in Chassidus that it's Eir Chezer. Because it's exactly right, because the moon is only a reflector. And there's no light on the moon, it's only a reflector.
Well, that's Earth either. How do you miss out?
In the Hanukkah, but we get day and night. The moon, I think, also has a day and night, but I think it's a little dark. Maybe not. day and night of the moon.
I think they have to take that. I think it's like space, you know. I think it's like facing the sun.
Like you mean like Alaska, like places like the North Pole and stuff like that.
So one of the astronauts landed, it was darkish. Where the astronauts landed, it was dark. Depending like if it's European, I think that's people mix.
The temperate zone was about a half a mile, maybe.
Is that real?
Like the way Europe.
Well, the moon is not conducive for life, that's for sure. They didn't have enough oxygen there for us, and there's other things.
No water.
No what?
Water. The water and water. There's no peace for it.
It fits very well because it says it doesn't have any light of its own. The moon. It's a reflector. It's like a mirror. So if you landed on a mirror, the mirror doesn't have any light. All it is reflecting what it has. I'm not sure. You have to know what the side when it's the side facing the sun. What do they see there? Interesting. It's probably written up. I'm almost sure there was a day and night. It may be what he's saying. It's not. It doesn't. Well, we know there's the dark side, and the dark is always dark side. Okay, so why I'm saying this is because maybe this was explained what he's saying here. Why saying the sun? You can say the sun, billion miles away. The sun is completely just like an Erev Vulcan. But because the whole purpose of the sun is to radiate on Earth, so in our solar system, we see the sun. But you know that it's limited because you see this distance, not unlimited light. Even though we know the sun is reaching this Earth, but we know that it's a limited flow, and somewhere the sun will continue to get diminished. So everything, even so, A is hard. This is all the parentheses, by the way. It's a long parenthesis.
No, that's the second one. Another one.
Oh yeah, okay. Well, Kamei Kenu Hadugma Lamaila, same thing, example above. The Cholare Adu Mugbelas Bam Shochosa. So just like we know Erev Lamata on Earth is this way, there's also an example above that every reflection is limited in its flow, its transmission. There are different levels in the form of its revelation, and Mustayim and its transmission concludes somewhere, stops somewhere. We learned this before about Ma'ila Mata, the spheres. Kesser flows and then it stops, and also Chachma to come, and comes Bina. So even if you understand spiritual time and space, it's still a limit. It's a limit by definition. It's a limit in the conceptual limit of the quality of this particular item.
It's going to be cancer stops.
The whole chapter.
Chapter with them.
5, 6 chapters.
Okay. Oh, it's going to never stop.
Yes, it does. We learned the whole thing about that as well. We learned that many chapters ago. That's why a person's desire is all in full intensity. We're going to allow for the other faculties to function. Wisdom, intelligence couldn't function if your desires are full passion. Could be behind the scenes at work, but not in its full revelation. Avlat Tainuk Shebeteda, and then the parentheses. But the pleasure in Teda, as opposed to the pleasures of this world, ain't no ketz with them. That's what the Medrash is saying. The Rizal is saying. In Samach Vav, there's a whole Maimorim on this, just on this Medrash itself as well. There's a length of Teda, tiny, a lot of discussion on this.
Tiny Himsha has it, or we have?
The tiny of Teda, the tiny of Teda.
Who's tiny?
What do you mean the tiny of our tiny? The Teda's potential giving us tiny. Ein lo ketz v'gvul, yes, b'chinas tiny gatzmi. Being that it's not a ha'ara, it's not a reflection, it's a fundamental, it's a core, essential tiny. So Teda is, we're going to learn Shashriya Mefarav. It's ultimate pleasure because it is how God's pleasure manifests in the Teda. Remember, pleasure here does not mean the pleasure of eating a meal or the pleasure of what we understand eating ice cream or something. Pleasure means experiencing the core of something. Pleasure means inner delight.
We unite with God's pleasure, so to speak.
Yeah. But we'll learn more about this. He's going to speak. Right now, he's just calling it this. He didn't spell out what that means tiny yet. Speaking of the limit, not the. Even though the Torah is Eir Pnimi, it's not an Eir Makif. Eir Pnimi, and we learn that Eir Pnimi by definition is defined. Nevertheless, it has no limits because it's a Tainug Atzmi. Let me explain Tainug Atzmi and let me explain this line. Very important line and very relevant to the whole discussion. It refers back to a certain chapter. First of all, let's talk about Tainug Atzmi and Tainug Avada. This isn't just words, it's really a very fundamental difference. Translate some examples. The word Tainug Atzmi is a word we use it again and again. What does it mean? So if we learn chapter 1, 9 Beis, literally chapter 1, end of chapter 1, it talks about, let me quote, Tainug Pashut Ba'atzmi. That a Tainug that does not come from something, but it's just a pleasure that comes from within, it's generated from within. Now, he's not saying this here, but Tainug Atzmi has several aspects to it. Here he's saying reflection as opposed to something that is a source. What does that mean? So we, as human beings in general, because we're dependent on things for sustenance, we don't think in terms of atzmi. We're constantly dependent on things. You don't feed yourself, you need food. You need food, you need to buy food, you need to purchase food, you need to eat food to sustain yourself. You need oxygen. We need each other, we need love, we need companionship, we need things. As soon as something is in need of something, it's not atzmi. No. Speaking of Chassidus, for example, the Friedrich Rebbe talks about Chassid was an atzmi. They compliment to say someone an atzmi, or pnimi. Atzmi is even deeper than a pnimi. What's the difference between a chitzon and a pnimi? So a chitzon usually refers to someone who's superficial, or even someone who's somewhat of a hypocrite. A chitzon. He puts on a show. To look good. A pnimi is someone who's a real thing. We know this person is the real thing, not just someone who's masquerading, or performing. He's not performing. In a pnimi, it takes eyes to be able to see a pnimi. Rabbi Rashab says, "A pnimi who it is, look at it nas." Pnimi is someone where he is, he's completely there. He's not preparing for a second later. He's not busy satisfying anyone. Everything is generated from within. Atzmi is even more so. Atzmi means he doesn't need others to define who he is. So a real chitzon is someone who asks him an opinion, he wants to know everybody else's opinion first. Before he makes his opinion. Doesn't have a self-generating, it's not just no confidence, may not even have a sense of self really in that sense. It's also confidence, obviously. An atzmi is an atzmi. Wherever he is going to generate, it's going to be a giver, an influencer. It's a real atzmi. It's a source. He's not a recipient, he's a source. He's a source of flow.
But a pnimi can be a recipient still.
A pnimi is lower than an atzmi, but I'm not going into the difference here because it's atzmi. I just use pnimi because it's another expression. Pnimi and atzmi are very similar. You're not going to find many places where it's distinguished. Compared to chitzen, a pnimi is like an atzmi. An atzmi would be more a rebbe. Pnimi you'd say a chassid. Pnimi. But there was also there were atzmi. The atzmi is not just. So an atzmi is really a rare person because he's not going to be swayed by anything. He won't be swayed by other people's opinion. He stands for what he stands, and you can completely trust it. He's not for sale. Period. It's an atzmi. It's one sign. Yeah. Or for rent. So. Sell it for rent. Lease. Kinds of levels. Just 4 levels. There's just shameless, shameless.
4 types of
4 times of bribery. Okay. Listen, you have to look at yourself. How would you be? With enough price. The price is high enough.
I'm like, I'm sitting here like
The Rebbe Rashab would say sometimes, the Rebbe would say, Zikuk does that an atzmi. You see an atzmi. See an atzmi, it's a whole different experience.
Who did he say it about?
He said that some Chassidim, and also sometimes on the Rebbe himself, he's about the Tatig of an atzmi. The Rebbe Rashab says from time, Shir Shalom. So I'm just explaining the word. So let's take it back to here. So ha'ara, sunlight, let's say, or light of a avukah.
Just mentioned it. Do we find that the Rebbe Rashab talks about Sval as much as the Friedrich Rebbe does?
Friedrich Rebbe has more sikhs. The Rebbe Rashab wouldn't have as much material, but he spoke it clearly. You can see he speaks a lot. You know, we have what was published. I don't know. Friedrich Rebbe Pasha spoke with people a lot more sikhs.
The whole time mentioned Sval.
I'm going to start measuring. I don't know. I can tell you one thing. The Rebbe once said by Fabrein that the Rebbe went to the oil much more than we went. No, but everyone thinks the Rebbe went to the oil a lot. He basically said the Rebbe went to the oil much more than anyone. Remember, he lived in Lubavitch, which was raised to go to the oil and no one had to know.
Oh wait, they're talking about this oil.
No, he's talking about that they went to the oil. It was a big thing. The Frierdiker Rebbe went to Israel. The Rebbe said not go to Israel because he couldn't go to the kibbutz and he couldn't go to the oil. So he went there instead. That's what the Rebbe said.
Wow.
Listen, that's another thing. But the point I want to make is, listen, the whole thing. There's a kuntis shtabchus on kibbutz tzadikim. It's a whole thing connecting to. Arizal spent 3 days by Miron every night. It's a serious thing. Kolov. I mean, those who know what it is. It's not just a, like a amusement park. It's tourists.
Yes, turn it together.
Yeah, Mr. Stratas, it's a dikim. I mean, you see that understanding. It's a very moving scene. Whenever you see this understanding. You see a Talmud in Fnei Rabbi. It's amazing. You see the minor Lashon. It's unbelievable. It's very strong words. Anyway, so on Atzmi,
People go every day to say 16 Shalom.
They're saying it to two, too. They're saying it to one.
If you're at me, yeah. No, if you're at me 1.5
The
to
Rebbe
my
Rashab,
anyway.
they went, so
I'm not sure if you're just there yesterday to say Shalom.
I don't know that the rules is
3 days, you have to spray.
well, Shabbat Pilpul.
3 days.
Extract the tree.
3 days.
If you're at me every time, it's gonna be meaningful.
Every day.
For 30 days, that seems amazing.
Moedani, you say every day. Moedani, you say every day.
No, but it's a lach and shulchan
I'm sure
aruch.
the Rebbe said, look, if you went to the Rebbe every day, if you're a real chassid every day, you will become a camp. That's why the maskiras wanted the bracha for discussion, because stuff becomes regular. If you went to technically went to the Rebbe every day, you hope that you will lose your awe. Anyway, so in Atzmi, going back to this, so when you say the sunlight or a flame of a torch, it doesn't have atzmistic qualities. It doesn't have it's coming from a source. It's not a source. So it has whatever was infused in it. To go that far, this far, it has a purpose. An atzmi is in itself what it is. Like a real atzmus is atzmus itself. Atzmus is called atzmi. Mitzir shem atzmus. What does that mean? The existence is real because he's real, not because he's doing something for anybody, not because he has value, not because he has contribution to make. We don't understand that type of value. For us, especially the most material part of the world, either you feel, someone say, what are you doing here? And you have something to contribute, something to give. In the world of Atzmi, that question is meaningless. Atzmi is always there because it's there. So I just want to explain. So tainugim that we have, and we have pleasure, let's say, in eating or reading a book, pleasure, even spiritual pleasure. It has a limit because we have a limit, and it's about a need. A real tainug atzmi is only in Torah because Torah is an atzmi. Torah is not a means of, let's say, if Torah was a book that's here to teach us how to invest in real estate, or a book even of laws, that's why David HaMelech was punished. If the Torah in any way is utilitarian, or only utilitarian, you're right away giving a limit to it. Because it's the utility. The Torah is coming to choke the clippers, to cut off their supply lines. The Torah is coming to show us that all the world is not Tefes Mokum because every word of the Torah the condition. It's great quality, but that's a limit. It's a limit as much as you need it, like any utility. However, the Torah is tiny gatsby. It's God placed Himself in the Torah. Anechi nafshi, non nafshi kshavos. I engraved myself. I wrote myself into the Torah. However you explain that, but it's definitely a godly wisdom. That's our Torah. Put it near any other wisdom. Even though wisdom in the world, even scientific wisdom, is also understanding God's mind. So then you're trying to understand the world that God created. But then you're talking about, that's utilitarian science. It's to understand, to manipulate, to make the world a better place, to develop technologies, whatever science does. It doesn't have an optimistic thing to tell you what is God like. It's telling you how God wanted the world to be. Chochmah Selah. It's telling you this is God's mind, this brilliant mind that He applied. We learned this. Remember when we learned everything we said, the different levels of Chochmah? It was very, that's Cham. The Demi Tzemech Chaim Medaber in Seichel. So he says Seichel of like Teva, because he called that, I think, the Tzemeach in Seichel. And he called the Seichel, Sheba Seichel was Teda. To know the core itself. So you want to understand God? You want to know what God is like? You need the Torah. You want to know what God wants? Or what kind of wisdom He used to create the world? Which, by all means, is brilliant. That's science. So there's a limit to it, because it has a function. The function is to build the world. Science has a limit. I mean, it's very brilliant. It's brilliant and it goes deeper and deeper, but it's a limit. There's understanding. Mineral, vegetable, animal, human beings, so the physics. Whatever the parameters are.
I know the world.
Yeah.
The world is already engineered.
So in the interface, Torah, on the other hand, is giving us a picture of what God looks like. Want to know me? Learn some Torah. It's like that story they tell, I don't know, it's a joke or whatever. When Pavarotti once did this rendition of The Lord is My Shepherd, Psalms 23. The Lord is My Shepherd, and everybody gave him a standing ovation. It was brilliant. Then an old Jew was standing there. Everyone sat down, and he got up and he did his rendition of the Mizmor Shem. Shemrei, yeah. So everybody started crying. So Pavarotti asked the Jew, why when I did it they applauded him, when he did it they cried. He said, because you may know the psalm, but I know the shepherd.
Whoa.
So he knew the psalm, and he knows the song, and he knows how to sing it well. The shepherd is a whole other story, knowing the source. So the Torah introduces us to God, and other wisdoms introduce us to God's tools. You could say to God's instruments, His plan, His wisdom. Now Torah also has wisdom, obviously, but it's about understanding God. In Chetzenis, you could say Bedak is the same thing. Really, you can't call it like science, but technically it's mechanical. It's what God wants. I want you to keep Shabbos, so there's 39 malachas to avoid. And every malacha is detailed. The details are more detailed, and there's nuances and so on. It's the technicality, what He wants of us. In truth, that's also believable, as we're going to learn. Because even the gvul of, but Pnimis HaTorah talks about God. What is God like? What's His purpose? What does He want from us? Nikla is not going to talk about the blik gvul of Elohim.
And that's parallel to Pnimis Act, sort of.
Yeah. That's parallel to that. And all the Pnimises are parallel to each other. All Chetzenis are parallel to each other. You can use that as a rule. It's relative. But basically, at every level, there's a Chetzenis and there's a Pnimis. So that's a rule you can choose. He said it many times. Chetzenis Chachma, and Chachma Tata, Chachma Elah. Pnimis Chachma and Bina, and then Shol Shabbat for Abba V'Imei Elohim, Abba V'Imei Tatayim. The others were more Chetzenis. Relative. Matan Torah and Pnimis HaChok. But in Matan Torah itself, we've been learning that there's outer and inner. So there's always an outer and inner. Even in Pnimis HaTorah, there's two ways to learn. You can learn Pnimis HaTorah and learn about Er HaGvul. You can learn Pnimis HaTorah and learn about Er HaBlik Gvul. So there's always a deeper aspect. Yeah. But the beauty is like this. So let's go back here. Very important. So now that's one thing I want to say. The second thing I want to say, I want to bring it back to a very vital chapter, which even when you learn it, it's like a little anticlimactic, so to speak. And the more I read further, the more I see how that chapter is a vital chapter. Because I was wondering when we learn it, you wonder why is suddenly throwing it in. Remember, right after the chapter of Kava Mida, Knei Mida, right? When he finished more or less the discussion of the office, what they did, he starts saying, chapter 159. So he spoke. Remember the Knei Amida Kav Amida. So he spoke Knei and Kav Amida. Remember he asked the question. Everything has to go through the measuring line. So he said, there's a difference in Kav Amida, which is Gvura, and Knei Amida, Kamei, remember was from the water, Chesed. Whole thing with the Ish Gabriel there. That they would have in his hand the bad with
the bad and the chut.
Yeah, the bad and the chut, right. The Knei Amida. That was chapter 158. On 159 he began and said, and he made a whole case to explain it's not Gvura as in Simtsum and Miyut and diminishment, it's Gvura mitzad his Gabus HaChayis. Remember he said, when an Atzmi expresses itself, how does it express itself? In tipin, exactly, like a Maya, in drops. So you can look at drops as being diminished flow, or you can look at drops as being the bursting out from the barrel that's so intense, so a drop comes out because it's so intense. It's coming from intensity. It's a very fundamental piece. Yeah. And what was the point? The point was that the Medida and Taylor, when Taylor speaks measurements, and there's a whole thing, he speaks the same like here. Switches and film. Remember, there was all the details. Not that it's still chesed. That the details are not their Hagvala Atzmis. That's the point. They're because God wants a definition, not because in our world, I give you a cup of water because you can't contain more than a cup, because you're limited and I'm limited. And if the energy would flow too much, we would be overwhelmed. But in 10, that's how Spidus are Lamata. But how are Spidus Ness and Spidus Aglusis? That's the shit aspect. The artist, the Bligvul artist, wants to have a structure of 10. For him, that 10 is just as intense and as Bligvul as actual Bligvul. But he's already identifying. See, he looks at the world, God looks at this world from that perspective, not from below, as basically divine Gvul, so to speak. But it's divine. Remember we spoke clearly, it's Ein Sof, as it's in Gvul. It is Gvul, not Bli Gvul, because he wants Chachma Bina in that sense. But it's not it's a Gvul Atzmi, not a Gvul Achrachi. In a way like we said in the last chapter, it's not compelled. The Tzimtzum will conceal this energy, intensity. And then the Spidus will reveal on our terms. So when you look at a mitzvah, you say, okay, I'm going to eat matzah on Pesach. And the second after Pesach, there's no chiyuv. And there's the amount to eat. For us, it's a limitation based on our limits. But you come to discover, no, this is a medidatsu. You do a mitzvah. You're really doing bligvul packaged in gvul. It's infinity in the palm of your hand. Because really, it's coming from God's will to have this mitzvah. God is saying, I want this to be in this moment in time. So you can look at the moment in time from our perspective, and then it's just today and not tomorrow. From God's perspective, no, today, not tomorrow, is simply a level I want. And that today is as eternal as eternity itself, if you use it for the purpose for which it was created. Yeah, it's a critical point in understanding really what the Torah mitzvahs do. That's why there's such a critical interface. Because without Torah mitzvahs, how do we go from time to beyond time? There's no way to do it. Even though the dynamics allow for it, because you have the 10 hidden spheres and the divine image, the artist said, but the problem is from our end. How are we going to get to the mind of God with infinite possibilities to one possibility? So Torah mitzvahs is a tool. He gave us a tool. It's like it basically bypasses the system, but runs through the system. Right? So that's why I say go back here. That's why he says. Okay, so it says.
Spiritualists of the nations of the world, but then I'm didactic and think to come, shaking the more religious.
Yeah. So when you say Torah mitzvah, you're talking
about which explains that a person really says that the kal is not a stira to the which is usually the case when a person is usually spiritual, they're less into details. No, big thing. There's detail. That detail. Who cares? But you know why? Because details from that perspective are inferior to the intensity. But if you saw details as being as atzmis, as ruchnis, and didn't take your ruchnis so serious, then the details are as important as the big picture.
When you say Torah mitzvahs, now you're doing more mitzvahs than that.
But also Torah, he spoke Torah comes in time. The Torah is told, was said in each pasha and so on. He's not distinguishing here Torah and mitzvahs. Speaking the mitzvahs is more in action, but Torah tells us each mitzvah what its time is. Talking now how Torah, in specific, mitzvahs is more than Torah in the exact word. So that's what it says. That's why Ime Yesha Teda B'Evnimi B'Kol Malkum Ein Bo Agbola Klal L'Fishu Taina Gatsmi. That's the thing. So let's speak like this. Remember, I gave the example. If you bend down to your child to pick him up because you have to bend down because listen, you're short, you're tall. There's no way to do it. Yes, so that's the limitations of this world. You have to diminish yourself. But if it's coming from a Taina Gatsmi, and your bending down is completely the same, you want to do it. In that invested moment when you're spending time with your child on his level, it's not a tzimtzum. It's Taina Gatsmi simply packaged like it's a Shechina, like you said. The Shechina wants he could be reflected in the expanse of infinite expanse, or he wants he could be reflected in a small mirror, in a small drop. That's the key here.
That's how they're
So we think in terms of okay, I only have the power to do this, I have the power to do that. I really don't have that power, you know. But from the Maila, what do you mean you don't have the power? That rule is the same as the same Elikus. What we have to overcome is our resistance and inability to see that way. We see our rule as Agbola, as a limitation. I don't have it, which explains really why when the Rebbe told Steinsaltz, the famous one, he said which project should he drop? So the Rebbe said, don't drop, add more projects. L'chen al Piseichel didn't have the time because the Rebbe is looking at it from that kind of perspective. I just see it yesterday at Zettel, the Moshe Hecht from New Haven. Amazing. Maybe they could settle the sort. Yeah, I told you, but I just got to repeat it again. He writes to the Rebbe, the Rebbe shifts in Hatzolah. The Rebbe should send a Hatzolah, salvation. I guess financially he was having difficulties in New Haven. The Rebbe writes, Torim Yikrov Aniyen, Kvar Shalachti. Before you've asked, I already answered you. I already sent Hatzolah. And his name is Rav Moshe Hecht to New Haven. And it's obvious from your letter today and all your previous letters that you don't yet appreciate who this man is and his abilities that he has. And if you did, you'd get over that, the Marashchera and the negativity and the this, and you'd see that you have everything you need. He's writing to him that obviously you don't realize I already sent his name, basically you. You know the story with Eliyahu Hanavi?
It's the same story that I told you. It's the example of the director of the OU.
I just told you yesterday also. Yeah.
He has to say a whole bunch of questions and everything. So Dayid says Wein Lib, and he's on flying stuff. Dayid says Wein Lib. And so then he said, my name is Wein Lib. Yeah. So that side was that then to say.
Yeah, that just came out from the
That was amazing. First time he
There's the story with the, the quick story of the Baal Shem Tov. So one of his students wanted to have a Gilei Eliyahu. So then he kept asking the Baal Shem Tov, can you have it already? She said, okay, fine. We go for Rosh Hashanah, we go to a certain place, a certain city. Long story, bottom line, he comes to the town, it's a house that Baal Shem Tov sent him, knocks on the door. Eliyahu, he said, our place is a wreck. Everyone's yelling, a bunch of children running around, a woman that's harried, it's like a mess. Baal Shem Tov sent him, he accepted. So he came in and said, maybe a room, yeah, we have a room, but we have no food. I said, no problem, we went and bought food for everybody, Rosh Hashanah, great. They had a great Rosh Hashanah. Okay, but he didn't say Eliyahu.
He was the Eliyahu.
He came back, the Baal Shem Tov didn't say nothing. So Baal Shem Tov said, go back for Yom Kippur. Okay, Erev Yom Kippur, you're about to come to the door, he hears the same racket, the same chur. What are we going to do? We have no money for food. So someone said, maybe the Eliyahu will come again for Yom Kippur.
Whoa.
Realized, sometimes you're the one. You're the one. I also saw you, I just saw yesterday, our own Rabbi Techta, his wife, he's told the story of her graduation. So she was from the first place Rivka began at some point.
What was her first name?
Shenda. Yeah. So when they finished elementary, it was the first time they were experimenting with high school. She was like, one of these educated, she didn't want to go to be an experiment. High school would never exist. So she went against everybody's the suggestion. She went and wrote to the Rebbe. She wrote to she doesn't want to be a guinea pig. When her father heard this, he was about to kill her. He went to the Rebbe. First of all, he complained. He said, "Oh, a guinea pig." He went to the Rebbe, said, "Shalosh." Anyway, they never answered the crossed out guinea pig and wrote pioneer.
Mm.
She says, I'm not a guinea pig, I'm a pioneer. Very nice answer. I love that. Huh? She told the story about the right direction. Anyway. Yeah. So bottom line is, yes, we have much more power than we think we have. Not because we're believable, not because we're still human beings, because the gavul that our lives is not as we see it as a diminished state, it's atzmi is the gavul. And Torah mitzvahs gives you that ability. If you don't have Torah mitzvahs, you're not going to be able to do it. Because then you're going with your mortal powers.
You're right, sure.
Torah gives you, basically Torah is giving you basically, it's camouflaging as gavul, it's believable camouflaging as gavul in our terms. So that's the difference. When you eat, and you need it, that's real gavul. You're a human being, you need to eat. You make a bracha on it. You use the food for the right kavanah, you are revealing the gvul atzmi, gvul of Ein Sof, in the gvul of your reality.
But you write show on it first. Same thing.
Yeah. That's the point. It's maybe, it doesn't do this kind of idea.
What?
So that's what he says. So even though Torah is pnimi, but it's not pnimi like the air pnimi of the spirit that goes and manifests into a stone. That's the difference. In Torah, the air pnimi is air atzmi. Whereas it was air pnimi, let's say in a stone or in a table or in any object, is not air atzmi. It's a likus. It's a functional, utilitarian role that it plays. Also perfect. Because the Rebbe wants it in the full. He doesn't want it in Torah is the way to reveal it there. You see how the power of Torah, Staka Baraisa Bar Alma, becomes so powerful. So when God looks in the Torah, Ein Sof looks in the Torah and says, the Torah tells you this is what happened at this time or this specific thing. You have everything happening here. You have the world, that's actual gvul. You have the Torah that's directing that gvul and telling you how to build it by a blueprint, which really is be'etzem and atzmi, just manifesting or camouflaging or whatever, masquerading is. You can't say it's masquerading because obviously the Torah does in Belubish in details. We spoke, remember, a korban. That's why he made such a fuss. A korban. All the aliyahs, if the korban, you do one thing wrong, the whole thing fails. That's how bound it is to details. However, that's not really the etzem of Torah. So now you start understanding why David HaMelech, that was why he was punished, because you missed, you went a little too much focus on what it's doing for you, and that, its real power is that Zalakus. I mean, obviously, the Dakus, David HaMelech. If he had his level, I guess they demanded that he should have been aware of that. I'm sure we're going to talk more about it. That's why it's a that's it. The be'emes sheyesh b'chinus tainig atzmi gam b'chinus sheyorda lamata. So now he's adding an interesting thing. The truth is, tainig atzmi also. Oh no. The be'emes sheyesh b'chinus tainig. You could say, okay, 1 second, but that's tainig atzmi lamata. He says no, because in truth, the tainig atzmi is also how the Torah comes down below. That shebetera shlamata ends up made of the gili. But it's there. It doesn't radiate in the gili in the revealed way as it is in the source. And that's what all the life force and the pleasures of the world are mamish nullified. Mamish nothing compared to the Torah, and it's the inner Torah. That's the tainik shabbat. You'll soon see why tainik is so important, because it's because shashrim lefana as opposed to his midas that. Now another parenthesis. Is this a long one? No fun.
10 lines.
Okay, that's okay. But compared to the Torah, the way it is below, which means the outer Torah, Hagam, Sheyesh Bo Gam Kinat Tainug Atzmi. Now he's going to explain. He's going to answer a question. We just said that Torah is Tainug Atzmi, so how could you separate between outer Torah and inner Torah? Outer Torah is also Tainug Atzmi. Not as revealed. So then we're back to square one. So what's wrong with it? Well, why do we say there's two levels?
That would answer.
Huh?
That would answer. See a way to answer.
Okay, I did because he said it already in the first parenthesis. That's why. He said things in there below. That's why. Okay, he's elaborating, fine. But he has to explain because you can spell it out, because we don't know what making a whole fuss here that contains that Taylor doesn't have it. We just say Taylor has tiny gospel, Taylor even below. It's an extension of the first parenthesis, basically. Even though it also has below also this core essential pleasure, the Komok means it may have been given. Nevertheless, it doesn't shine and reveal. And that's why the Erev Chayis, it's going even more subtle. And Teda the Etzim is that. But this Teda, as it does speak to our lower levels as well. It's again the interface. Teda has to speak on our levels, even though fundamentally in Eratmi, it also needs to speak to us on our level, or else we won't elevate. Remember, our Gvul has to elevate. That explains actually a beautiful thing in Nigla, why Nigla has to speak about those details. It always made me crazy with the yeshiva. I went like nuts. I said, what did we learn? I remember I asked my teacher what we did in Islam.
The big picture.
I said to him, this sounds like the details of the law, of law school. If you want to be a lawyer, you want to know, I said, who was interested in reading mortgage contracts? You read a mortgage contract. Every possibility is mentioned there. We're going to read a mortgage. Only a lawyer. Even lawyers don't read it. They give their assistants. She said, has he ever been detained? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, fine.
Wow.
I didn't slap him back.
Everybody in that class.
He really slapped you.
They got through one punch.
Yeah, and then you fell. Don't worry about it.
Everybody in my
I
class.
deserved worse. I deserved worse. No, nothing about me. It was once even worse. I got a bigger slap. I thought Richie Whitkish was in my class. So I gave him a slice. He was like bending down.
All right.
But I think it did wonders for him. Rabbi.
Where's it? Right in New Jersey?
I had hold it up on him. Rabbi Marlowe was also.
Where's Richie?
No, it was Mars. There was Ocean Park.
No, where's Richie Witkins?
He's there.
Here.
He's a tall guy. He was like, he's the only guy in class that was as tall as the teacher. You understand? When the more trouble I made, I made other trouble. I wasn't from the worst, but I was like on the edge.
Did that next time.
Didn't get popped inside 12 year old. Talking about what he said. It's implicit.
What do you think?
I wish I really learned that.
You did have a legitimate question.
My learning started after the yeshiva, after my formal years in the elementary and high schools. Okay.
Your brother says the same thing. He's constantly saying the same thing.
Yeah.
Actually, he's exaggerated because he actually did learn, and he was the guy that we all he learned all the time. He was like a real bookworm.
He says all his knowledge is spike yeshiva.
It's nice lines, but he learned a lot in yeshiva. He actually learned.
Your life. You picked the told the brothers one.
I know that he learned.
I learned to examine all.
Yeah, he really learned. He's a goody guy. Triadach maybe, but it definitely sounds more dramatic.
I mean, if he had his capability,
Maybe. Of course, yeshiva has its own quality. I saw it as like a holding pattern, basically, like official, like a professional babysitting service, just to keep us open spaces. It's a holding pattern. You know what I'm playing?
That's a mile. That's a mile.
Hanging around the veins. We survived. It got better. My son, I think, she got a little better. Yeah. No, so we had a bunch of refugees who didn't know what
you need us.
It's just ridiculous. No, they didn't know how to read. I mean, you talk about a teacher who couldn't read either. So you're always looking for an excuse to read books and tell stuff or something. No, it's sad. It says if you behave, we'll read talks and tales. So we used to say to ourselves, you know what? Let's see what he can do if he doesn't read talks and tales. So we said, we're not going to behave. He anyway read anyway talks and tales. Because what else was he going to do? They discovered, kids discovered these things. Yeah, the wrong people. Rabbi Garfinkel was excellent, should have been for the older. I think I had a bunch of pictures of us. The men crazy. 10th grade. He was like brilliant. There was a mix that they took. They made some type of like cradle, And the guy that should have been the Zal with the Bachman, all the Bachman ended up being a second grade teacher. I mean, it was insanity.
Sixth grade.
Yeah. I love it. I could write a book. If I wanted to embarrass our sister, a very good book. I have 2 books. Animal Farm. You know read Animal Farm? Orwell? I have a Babbage Animal Farm. I have all the characters. I have the weasel and the fox and the pig. The elephant. You know Orwell's Animal Farm?
I know Robbie Goldman also. He was in it.
Yeah, it was like a joke. It was serious for us. For us, the big dream came true. My yeshiva burned down. The dream of kids. Actually, in 8th grade, I remember it happened. It was a Sunday. And the gym went on fire up to the top floor bed for the day. We were outside and we were cheering. He said, "What are you doing?" The teacher said, "What are you doing? That's supposed to cheer." And we're like, it was like better than anything, better than a blizzard, better than the snow. It was like the whole yeshiva burning down. Like, great. I mean, it was a joke for us. I mean, I was 12 years old. Then they put us in the shuls in Crown Heights. Can you imagine? Shuls. There was no one watching. It was a pleasure. For 3-4 months. It was great.
No talks and tales.
So my shul was right near. I remember what was his name? Turnick. He had a pizza shop. So our shul was right near a pizza shop. Very convenient. So it was really.
Which shul was it?
The shul on where Shane is.
Harkness?
Yeah. That was our shul. And the celebrationist today was a pizza shop. It was called Hamoyer. Remember?
That's the first pizza.
Quality paper was it?
It was garbage pizza. It was frozen, but it was for us, kids. Far from Iron Base we were, I can tell you. Very far.
But someone asked me to do this.
So what's this got to do with our discussion?
Yeah, I asked me to do
And that's me. Oh, I know why. Chavis is on there.
That's a good question.
It is a good question. I've thought about it many times.
I mean, but a lot of disputes and all sorts of things we think about it.
No, it's much not the way. It's the function. It's how it was functioning.
Not for now. May have made no difference because the river would be dependent on all that anyway, no matter what he would do. He couldn't come in to give Rosh Hashirim and keep attendance. But let's go back. The reason I mention it is because when I'm learning Gemara, you get into all these details, but if you understand them as being Torah, applying itself to the Gvul, so think of it like a teacher or a parent applying itself to the details of our lives, to elevate us. So that's what he's saying. So even though the Torah is really Tainug Atzmi, but the way it comes down, that's not revealed in the outer part of Torah. That's a very important parenthesis. Because that's why the energy and the life force in the world is significant.
Now that we learned this, it's all revealed in that.
If Gal is begins Tainug Atzmi, the Torah Lamata, they have the Durim down. Now he's adding something. Beautiful. And how do you reveal the Tainug in Atzmi, the core Tainug in Torah below? That's the Birurim. It's the Birurim. In other words, Lamaila, how do you reveal the Tainug Atzmi Gan Eden, let's say, or higher? They're not dealing with the details of this world. So they say they have man in Bezer Veshkina. They study Torah and they enjoy the pleasure of, ultimate pleasure of knowing God. Down here, how do you reveal Tainug Atzmi through Birurim? Birurim means the refinement of existence.
And the realization that all
Birurim, with the sea, Birurim, there's two Birurim. There's Birurim of mitzvahs, but there's also Birurim of Torah, the Yigiyah. I'm sure it's going to be from somebody. Yeah. Yigiyah and Torah, there was the Lashon there. Yigiyah, he uses their Lashon. Man the Doch, right, Doch the Bill the Reis, yeah. The struggle. The one that is struggling to Yigiyah and Torah. But let's read it inside. And the primary thing is in the Birurim and Torah itself. Like, what's the whole point of Gemara? Libun Hilchaseh. Birur Halach. That's what you say. You go to a Rav, or you go to a Sedan and learn Agin, you're going to be Birur Ha'inyan. What's Birur Ha'inyan? What's Birur? It means clarifying. Why do you need to clarify? Because we live in a world where it's not clear. And our minds are blocked. Right. I'm talking about Bidur now, the learning, the Bidur in the heart of the key of the. Because there's Bidurim, we're not talking about it. Remember, he's talking about Bidurim, he wants to reveal the Tiny Shabbat. This is a fundamental parenthesis, very, very important. It's staying at Chachenis Sateda and its role. And he has Bidurim Shemavarim B'Kei the Bidurim that you empower with the power of Teda. That's not the Bidur in Teda. The power of Teda, like he says, will come out of Yehuda, Kula Tenuya Ben Nazikim. Rabbi Yehuda, his whole learning was Nezikin, that was his expertise. Shazel Levada Berudim Kaneda. What does that mean? Because his role, his shlichus in Teda itself was to be Mevada Berudim. So that's why everything he did was Nezikin. Nezikin is damages.
That's a lawyer.
But that's not. That's in the area of that he was focusing on. Nezikin. That's where his Berudim were. That's B'Keichate. Arzel Mashatein Berudim Ba'elam. That's Berudim Ba'elam, because what's Nezikin? Nezikin are the laws of litigation, the laws of damages, and our responsibilities.
That should have been Rabbi Shvei's answer.
So what does that mean? You learn Teda. Teda tells you how to deal when someone damages another person's property or animals or possessions and so on. So the Keichat Teda is telling you, I am Mevada. That was Rabbi Yehuda. That was his thing. So this is what the Teda is Mevada. This is Berudim Ba'elam. And this too is far greater than Berudim of Tefillah. Davening is a different type of Berudim. Because Teda is Mevada Mamayla Lamato. Teda tells you his situation. Two people, let's say, living side by side, and one person, this animal trampled on your grass, or broke your cat, take care. The different things. All the different things, all the different halachas. So Teda tells you, Mamayla tells you, this is what you're supposed to do. So Teda gives you clarity, helps you mevada a world that can be damaging. People can hurt each other. It tells you what to do. Tefillah is birudim. Mishkas Makamakal says elsewhere is Mamakilam. You're taking your nefesh habamish, your animal soul. You're taking your material world and you're elevating. Just to clarify. But there's a third birudim he's not mentioning here. Birudim be'elam mamish. Okay, no, that's true. This is birudim in the world with the keichat. But yes, birudim shatenim is ba'lelas bezeh. Oh, yeah, he uses this lashon. And then there's a birudim that the Teda itself gets clarified. That's the man the daik, someone who is daik, someone that is focusing daik more than focusing. The daik as the daik. Yeah, he's like he's digging the milan the chuchmas in the words of wisdom of the Teda. In other words, he's pouring over. The word is pouring and Poring. He pours over and is really dissecting and looking to understand every letter. You know, so when that type of deal, when like Rashi or something, you want every letter to be clear. So in Teda you're making a birudim. This is the questions and the answers. That's the birudim Teda. The whole Gemara is about questions and answers. Previous Teda, he says in the Gerasakation, less common than Machlekes, V'lei and so on. Has no questions of Machlekes, but Megillah is full of questions and arguments back and forth. The way of learning is, what are you doing? You're coming into it with, first of all, you're not clear. And you have many different things. We live in a world, it's a Chashakim Eshivani, he said Talmud Bavli, that's what he says there. Gemara says. Talmud Bavli is called darkness, because it's dark. And you're coming, and what are you doing? And you're starting to struggle. What's the pshat and what's the meaning and so on. So what you're doing is, you're la'amis, you're certifying, you're ratifying the truth of Teda. In a world that on its own may not recognize that truth. This is not in order for another purpose. That to bring birudim in, what he said before, birudim in the world. Or to bring energy into your soul. That's another purpose. Kim la'amis. This is meant to be a birud in Teda itself. Yeah. It says at length, length this is actually a length. The whole Hemshech is about this. The struggling in Teda. That's why the Bab is greater than Talmud Yerushalmi, the Matlo Maila, and all that work from below.
Bab is higher.
And that's how in Chetzenius you come. Through this radiates in a revealed way the core Tainug. But without this struggle and without this effort, this exertion in Torah, it does not radiate below. So what do we have here? What's he saying here? He's answering the fundamental question. He's asking. So Chetzenius HaTorah is more related to the world. But that is only revealed through the struggle, through the exertion in Torah. On its own, the Torah deals with the details of this world. And thus, you don't have the Tainug Atzmi that revealed quite the same way. Whereas in previous HaTorah, the inner is the Tainug Atzmi, and that's why you say in it that it doesn't have any limits.
It needs a gear too. So that's why you can call this first level the mirrors.
Didn't finish here, but he's probably going to spell it out. Yeah, because that's what he saw. He saw how Torah was relating to the world. He wasn't saying Zmiris because I'm enjoying God's pleasure. He's saying Zmiris because it makes the world not significant for my troubles. And it cuts off the supply line for the clippers. If he was dwelling on Pnimis HaTorah, he would be focusing on God's Ein Safe. He was focusing on Torah. I mean, I'm just spelling it out. I'm sure he's going to say it. I'm positive he's going to say it. But I mean, I'm just, we're just connected.
Well, the also.
Yeah, but through the Berudim, a different way, through the Berudim.
He felt connected.
Look, the Berudim are necessary too. The Berudim, you have to apply yourself to this world. So we're not talking about that there's no, that Chetzenius HaTorah shouldn't exist. There's a need for it. Why is there a Chetzenius HaTorah in the first place? Because you need a Torah that applies itself to the world. The question is, if you get say that's the whole Torah, that's the Menesh. Or it becomes your primary focus. Anyway, that's not, he's going to say that. I see at the end of the chapter he speaks about Zmiris, so I'm sure he's going to talk about it. What he just qualified here was to say that Chetzenius HaTorah also has the Tainug, but it's through this work. Pnimis HaTorah, in other words, you get the Tainug more, not through fighting the darkness, but through Gilead. It's like, never seen that in the way. Yeah, it's very similar.
And when the Rebbe said that all of your have been accomplished at this point, that feeling for what we're saying.
First of all, the Berudim that the Rebbe's talking about, he talks about the Berudim in the world, not the Berudim in Torah. And Torah says clearly against occasion that will be an endless journey to continuously get more clarity in Torah. That's first. He says in against occasion, that same Simon Chavav, he said, what about Nasadavi, we will already have, you won't need to know dinim and all that. So it'll be Yechudin, Yachid Yechudin Al Yeh. So it's not to clarify from Isser and Heter, that won't exist. What's right and what's wrong. We'll know right and wrong. But in Torah itself, you can call Berudim. It's higher than Berudim, but it's Gilead.
It will be taken. It will be not even Mesh on a Yom sense.
Yeah, that's what he brings. The whole brings this way. Yeah. So Chabot, the whole way.
So Berudim in the world means looking at current events, right?
No, Berudim in the past, they talk about this 288 Mitzvot Kedusha, changing the world. The Berudim in Torah, I mean,
that is Berudim in Torah, I thought.
I don't know. I would probably say the Rebbe's meaning the end of Berudim is the Berudim in the world, not the Berudim in Torah. But it could also connect to the Berudim in Torah. It's different. The Berudim in Torah is very different.
Same with the articles. It's not only one for work articles.
But regardless, whatever the Rebbe meant, one thing he also said that we have to open our eyes and recognize it. It means we don't recognize it. So you can have all the Berudim done, and you could still be asleep.
Yeah, but does opening your eyes take the same thing that what took earlier to be Mevar Berudim?
No.
So in other words, do you have to do the same thing that you have to do?
Let's make believe you were fighting a war for 2,000 years. So your psychology, your mentality, every second of the day is in the middle of a war. And then someone tells you the war is over.
Japanese
You
hiding
have to
out.
rechange your whole.
So Japanese
The
hiding
Israelis,
out.
they think they're constantly
Right, for the Japanese, that still think, yeah. So you have to recalibrate your whole mind, because you're so, like, for example, many Jews have goals in town.
Right, they think the whole world's
They're
against
still
us.
afraid,
The whole world's against us.
still afraid of you know, when there are people here that still think the KGB is following that.
In reality,
And obviously it's true.
yeah.
The local KGB,
All over
IRS, NSA, singular.
No, there are Jews that
Obama.
think the whole world, they have a mentality the whole world is against us. Because Bill is a 2,000-year mentality. No. In reality, they all love us. Everybody loves us. Nobody.
They say there are no, they say there are no challenges.
No, I'm talking about us open-minded Lubavitchers that we're not.
If someone told you tomorrow that today that Yitzhahara was killed, you know where Yitzhahara.
Well,
But your whole psychology is set up with a Yitzhahara. You think you have. You know, the Gemara said that Rasulullah Tzaddikim will say Yitzhahara was a big mountain. We'll see it was a little mountain, but we think it's a powerful force. So if you think your Yitzhahara is controlling your whole life, then someone tells you really it's not really controlling. You have to recognize that. That could be a hard thing to come to. Because your whole tools are set up for that. So I'm not saying Yitzhahara was shach, that the Rebbe never said that. That's going to be in the later stage.
Chopsy speech
People
right
say
into
Yitzhahara. But to say that there's less of a battle, the Rebbe clearly said there is. And I think the Rebbe felt that if we live that way, we'll become that way. But you have to really believe it and go for it. It's like the Alter Rebbe said to them, the Snyder who said, see the machazos, you know, they fake it. They make believe they're pious. So he says, so the Mishnah, that a pauper, a wealthy person makes himself a pauper, you end up being like that. So then Alter Rebbe said, let them make themselves. The Alter Rebbe was saying they should be hypocrites, not because we know that it says that it's Gedish, that Pneumius, everyone wants it. So fine, so the outside force your Yitzhahara to do it, then ultimately you'll come to the Teich, Shalei L'Shma, the inner dimension. For sure, I have no question about that. It's like psyching people up. I see, look, I'll give you an example. One example. A few years ago, if you remember, Haiti had an earthquake. Different type of natural tragedies. You don't know if you're a student of history, right? Read my history. In history, what was always happened when there was a natural disaster in a country, you know what happened? Every neighboring country raped and pillaged and took all the resources of that country that they did. Nobody helped them. They destroyed them. A natural disaster was like the building of your neighbor falls down. Hey, time to steal everything. That's the attitude. So today you don't have that. You have countries competing who's going to send humanitarian aid. So let's even speak like a cynic. I'll be like Rav Moshe. That there's a whole conspiracy on it. That, that there really is because everyone wants to have the marketplace. They have now Haiti. They can send McDonald's and computers.
90% is still homeless there.
That is mine. But even if you want to speak like that, but the bottom line is, today it's popular to help and not to pillage. So even if it's Shalei L'Shma, because everyone's going to see on CNN is suddenly coming to do that. Once upon a time nobody had cameras around. Let's even say that. But you see one thing, that when people are conformists. When a lot of people do something for good, everyone starts doing it, even though maybe ulterior motives. But you know what? They never have no problem with that at all. You can psych up everybody. The big smoke out day in America. One day don't smoke.
which one?
Whatever that day is. So what happens? You feel like everyone's doing it. I'll do it for a day. Imagine I actually did this, I tried to do it. Imagine you could announce one day, Global Day of Goodness. Everybody is good for one day. And even criminals, you take off one day. Imagine you could convince the world let's fake it even for a day. And people would see what it's like. I think it would show people you can do something that you think better. The problem is, why most people wouldn't do it? Because they don't show someone else. I have no problem not to run to the cookie jar. But I want to make sure no one runs either while I'm not running. That's the problem.
1 hour practice we had the other day.
Yeah. But for example, in a room like this, 10 of us can make a decision that we're going to do, for one day, we're going to do something, let's say for the Rebbe or Chassidus, whatever. It's conceivable. And remember, the world is basically 7 billion individuals like us. So it's just a matter, so it's not inconceivable such a concept. So sometimes you need to psych people up. That what's popular should be the good thing. Why does it have to be the bad thing? Look, Hitler was able to convince 100 million people, Germans. To do something goes against the grain of every human being, even Germans. No, really. Goes against the grain. To killing his children, to watch, to be silent. He's able to convince them. And there's no question it's easier to convince 100 million people to do something good than to do that. 100%. Because it's easier. It's more natural to us. He convinced the whole country that God Almighty. And I'm not saying they're not to blame and they were a part of it. We're kind of getting into who they are.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is...
authority, of course, the president can do the same thing. For goodness, if you want.
Exactly.
If he gave speeches like that, of course.
Exactly. That's the point. That's why I feel the Rebbe was very much like a Reagan. Reagan, forget about substance. He was able to inspire people to become volunteers. The Rebbe made a big fuss when JFK did the same thing. He's a youth corps. Peace Corps. Use that as an example.
Peace Corps.
And forget about it, because the Rebbe didn't care about the policies. He cared if a person is a president, leaders, leadership, to inspire for good. The Rebbe, that was always the whole purpose of a leader. Economy, even Israel take care of itself. The Rebbe did not look at it that. The bottom line is that you are a voice for a higher moral ethic, moral good. That was the bottom line. Which is, if you think about the Rambam, when he said that Christianity and Islam, I remember he was living in the worst of times. Crusaders, Islam, there wasn't a world like, today it's not the best of times, but you could say things that it was the worst of times. He was living under, yeah. And he writes that they paved the way for Mashiach. I mean, that's a God will be Yisrael can only say that. Why? Because he saw that ultimately, whatever it is, that they're teaching at least some principles of morals. And one day, it'll take hold, even though it wasn't yet that. That's a visionary, only a visionary could write. That to me is like unbelievable. There's no mockery. There's no mockery. There's no mockery. Spoke about a phenomenon that it's big.
It had to be that way when the parents they
a beautiful man write such a thing is pretty small.
What did he say? The Rambam wrote something?
Yeah, that.
They took about full maybe it's censored, but he basically wrote that Christianity and Islam. He first knocks them. He says he talks about Islam's messiahs. Yeah, yes, he calls them a Meshuggah. And then he says, it's not like he bought into it, he knows what we're talking about. And yet he said,
but it brings morals.
What did it say? They say God's mysterious ways.
It brings like morals to
the fact that this place says it brings the Hayam all over the world, and the fact that bring the message.
Not morals, that they believe in the higher.
The unity, Mashiach. Even the Mashiach, which is, Yeah. The pretty big. Anyway, let's go back here. So where we are. So this is
the run.
It says by Inyanus. I'm just wondering if we should stop or we should just go further. I don't know how far we said Inyanus.
I have thought to finish.
The chapter we won't finish.
No, just not.
Okay, so what do we establish? I just want to not be confused here. That there's two parts to Torah. Since the Torah is the world is more related to existence, and the Pneumius is complete. The world has no value at all, meaningless. It's kolal. It's the tiny atzmi. Therefore, it's the endless akusim doesn't have limits. Even the Torah is Chitzenis. It also has tiny atzmi, but that is not revealed. That is revealed through Birurim, which means through struggling in this world. So in other words, you're also dealing with the elements of the world to reveal that tiny gospel. That answer.
That's over.
It's not over until we recognize it.
Yeah.
There's a question to this. But Inyan, this is the Ne'is of Bereshit Sav Pashut Zayin Gimel. I'm sorry, Gimel Nebel. It says in Bereshit chapter 17 that Gimel there are three types of droppings. Drippings. Nebel sometimes refers to like leaves from the tree also. Right?
Peiros and Nevlis Minei Ilan. That's the words.
Nevlis Chochma Shalamayla Teva. So three Nevlis. Nevlis Chochma Shalamayla, the so-called
torsion.
He's in droppings. You don't like droppings.
Drippings is different.
Drippings.
Droppings is like an animal dropping.
Right.
That's the
Drops.
The leaves. The neighbor is Chochmah Shalom is Torah. In other words, Torah is like the wisdom of above. Like think of above is like a tree. He's going to say now, and the leaves that fall off it are like the Torah that come down below.
Hate is the whole.
It's a
Look, my pears are nameless minayilam, like fruits that fall off a tree. Shuli yesem mesis chitzenis haperes. Why do they fall? So he calls them mesis haperes. They are the mesis, the extras, and the outer dimension of the fruits. Because the fruits, the truth is because of their maturity. They mature, so they're ready to fall off. But why is it called mesis? Because he's not saying that's not mature. It means to say they've finished their process of leading to the tree for their nourishment and for their growth. So what are they? They're the extras now. They're no longer it's like a child coming out of the mother's womb. The time has come. So he's not trying to dismiss the fruits. He's trying to say that compared to the tree, they're now extras. And they basically have to leave room for the next fruits. Continues. Same thing is above. The Chachma law above the divine supernal wisdom is in the level of Chakim, is wide but not in knowable knowledge, not in knowable wisdom as we know. It's higher than comprehension.
It's good, it's good.
And what's drawn down from this higher level supernal wisdom in order to create, to shape the letters of the Teda. Because what's revealed from the Teda is only the letters of the Teda. So we're going to soon learn, Mesh's Bar, the Samach, as we shall soon explain. Because we're going to learn there's Asius, there's Tansah, Asius, Nekudis, Tagin, Asius, Asius, Nekudis, Tagin, Tangin. Tangin Teda is the previous. So he's going to say, so what was revealed to us is only the letters of Teda. Asius, Gamma, Eram, established basis. So now these letters and the energy, the message, or the wisdom that's manifested in these letters, they're only from the outer part and the external of the wisdom. That means nameless. So just like the fruit that fall off a tree, they're no longer from the essence of tree. They've now become their outer dimensions that just, same thing here, from the tree of the inner wisdom, which is beyond wisdom, we've got a drop. Something, a leaf has fallen off, a fruit has fallen off, and that's wisdom. So we see here clearly how Teda goes through gradations as it comes down below. Tehini is B'Teda Taimim Nekudis Tagenesis. Now in Teda there's four things. Taimim are the song, is the song. Taimim are the actual, the throat. The notes. Yeah, you could say the notes. It also means the taste, the pleasure, as we'll learn, but because it gives you the song. So, if you don't have the timing, you just read it dry. The Kudis is the pronunciation, the vowel sounds. Yeah, the comments aleph, ha, bay, ba, and so on. Tagim are the crowns on top, more mysterious. Ace is the letters themselves. Every letter has four things. There's aleph. There's the tag on top of the aleph, crowns. There's the kudus. This is the pronunciation. What do you call it? The kudus. Vowels. And then we have the timing, the way it's sung, the way it's supposed to be read. It says sometimes tena, a samta b'tena, like the kudim. The tena is the Rosh Tevis. The Baal Shem Tov says timing the kudim is aces.
Wait, so what is it?
Aces.
There's a holos itself for the
What?
notice will go on
The letters.
the letters. And it says Osius again in another sense.
It's explained now what that means. Why the letters is explained. It's not because it's only the external. Sha'asis and B'chinas Malchus. The Aces, the letters at the level of Malchus. The Shashim B'chinas Chachmei La the Abed Yosef Barata. So it goes like this. Malchus of 11, and their root is in the higher wisdom because Abba Yosef Barata is the Abba is the foundation, is the source of the daughter. Malchus. Do you say Esis HaTeira, because the foundation, Yosef, the foundation of the letters of Teira, Hem B'chinas Chachma. So Abba is Chachma, and gives birth, is the foundational element of the daughter, which is Malchus. But that's only the outer and the outer and external dimension of wisdom. This is what's drawn down from the written Torah to the oral Torah. The Malchus, the Peh. The Malchus Peh, Teira Shabbat Peh Karin Allah. Why is it called Peh? Because Peh is Malchus. The Malchus Peh, Teira Shabbat Peh Karin Allah. The Teira Shabbat Peh or Pirush Shubir, I mean, it's known that the oral Torah is an explanation, is an interpretation, explanation of the mitzvahs in the written Torah. What comes revealed in the oral Torah is only the outer and external from the wisdom of Primis, of Teira Shabbat. Meaning only the Gufa Mitzvah, it tells you what you're supposed to do, the actual body of the mitzvah. That's what the Torah tells us. Which is the wisdom that manifests in the letters of the Torah. My time, Amakra. Like many times in the Gemara you say, my time, what's the reason? So it says, because it also says in the Apostle, the Chol HaDrosh of the Torah, B'chinas Eisis. In other words, all the droshes in the Torah are based on the letters, because it says so and so. Al B'chinas, this is Eisis. Al B'chinas Tanad, which is time in the Kudin Tagim. The three other dimensions, Leibot B'gili B'Teira Shabbat Peh. That's not revealed in the oral Torah. Rak Ma'at Mazir, only a little dimension, a small part of it. Like we find Rabbi Akiva, Dafka Rabbi Akiva was able to darshan and learn something from every dot, from every edge, from every crown, from every tagin are made of kutzin, from every detail.
But what does it mean a kudus or not? Like, what's the word?
Because when you Teira Shabbat Peh is simply learning out things from the Psukim. It's not telling you the Taimei and Teira. They're not telling you the song or how to pronounce or the deeper dimension of the letters. It's taking a word in the Teira Shabbat and explaining it. It's purely the explanation of those Psukim. It doesn't have the deeper dimension.
What do you mean? Who explains Kriya Ksiv? Who explains what the...
He explains it. It doesn't have it on its own. It's just explaining from Teira Shabbat. Teira Shabbat has it.
Teira Shabbat has four dimensions, you say. Teira Shabbat focuses primarily what we learn out from what it says in the Psukim, not from Ramazim. Only Rabbi Akiva, very few. You can't learn, you find Amar Kra, you don't find someone say, oh, I have proof for this mitzvah because of the timing, because of the way you sang the word, or because of the kesed, or the timing, or the case. You learn it from what it says in the pasuk. You don't learn it from the hidden signs or pronunciation marks. Gentlemen,
There are some cases.
there are, but there are exceptions. But the primary Teira Shabbat Peh is the seichel, the psukim. See, it says a pasuk. It says a pasuk. Keep Shabbos. Teira Shabbat Peh will darshan that pasuk. The Asius of the pasuk. You won't darshan the Ramazim in the letters and so on. Again, there are exceptions, but there are exceptions.
What's Nekudis is the vowels? Nekudis is only in Teira Shabbat Peh.
That's not what he's saying. That's not the issue here.
Everything. Those are vowels. Those are, he's explaining how it's supposed to be.
Right.
That's vowels.
Even if it doesn't have it there, they're there.
There's no vowels in the
The Teira Shabbat Peh is primarily the understanding.
How to read it. That's.
I think we should stop here because I see this going into more intricate details. We'll go over it again. Okay, we'll stop here. The first half of chapter 173, page 349 and 350.